speaking of resources, if you guys take a look at this white packet, if you didn't grab one on the way out. This is a list of seniors who volunteered to just talk about their experience. So to start, we're gonna just go down the line and have everyone say their name and where they worked this summer. So.
Hi, I'm Jasmine. I worked at Cooper University Hospital in Camden, New Jersey this summer.
Hi, I'm Taylor. I worked at Northwestern in Chicago.
Hi, I'm Catherine. I worked at CHOP as a Flynn Oncology Fellow.
Hi, I'm Emily. I worked at the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago.
Hi, I'm Devin, and I worked at Mass General Hospital.
Hi, I'm Mary, and I worked at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia.
Hi, I'm Kate, and I worked at Memorial Sloan Kettering.
Hi, I'm Brianna, and I worked at MedStar Georgetown University Hospital.
Hi, I'm Alexandra, and I worked at NYU Langone Medical Center. And I also, the previous summer, worked in overnight summer camp as a 24-hour medical assistant, so I can talk a little bit about that too.
Hi, I'm Kelly, and I worked at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota.
Okay, so the first question we're going to start with is if you guys could just explain what your search process was like and also what the application process was. So, Catherine, you want to start since you have the microphone?
So last year I came to this event that you guys are at now, and I kind of compiled basically a mass Excel spreadsheet that kind of said hospitals I was interested in, when their application went live, when it was due, additional notes, and then people I met along the way. And I just literally saved that to my desktop and kind of used that as my guide for the next few months, because some hospitals, the applications do come out now, and others don't come out till March. So it's really important to basically stay organized and be on top of a lot of your interests, and those you connect with, you can put their email in that document as well. So I would say my search process started right after this event pretty much. A lot of brainstorming in the beginning, and then I was able to kind of go onto the websites, learn a little bit more about the program, see which ones I want to pursue, and then just kind of get going on the application.
Did anyone have a specific hospital that they had their mindset on? If you want to talk about that.
So I'm from right outside of Boston, and I really wanted to go home this summer, so I was really looking towards Mass General because there was one fellowship I really wanted. It was actually sort of similar to the oncology fellowship that Catherine worked for. It was called the Galoni Fellowship. And so I applied to it, and I didn't get it, which is okay because they had forwarded my resume to other oncology units along Mass General, and one of the units, nurse managers, really liked my resume and had me in for an interview, and that's how I got the job. So I guess that's a positive, that if you don't get something, something else can work out too. So I mainly only applied to hospitals in Boston. But.
And going off of that, can you guys explain kind of what the application process was like? Were there multiple steps to it, or does anyone?
Okay. So like I said, I worked at the Rehabilitation Institute of Chicago. I filled out an application in, I think it was beginning of February. I heard probably a month after that in March that I was asked for a phone interview. They called it a phone screen. So I scheduled that, and then I talked to someone on the phone for about 15 minutes. They asked me basically about school, what classes I've taken, clinical stuff. They did ask me what my greatest weakness was on the phone. That's a big interview question that they asked me right away. And then after the phone call, I got a call 10 minutes after that saying I was asked back for an official interview at the hospital. And that's in Chicago, and I'm from Chicago, and luckily they were doing the interviews over Easter break, so I was able to go in and see them. Otherwise, it would have been over Skype. So I had 2 interviews, I guess you could say.
Did anyone have a different experience?
So I worked at Northwestern, and I think I sent in my application around December, and I heard back about 2 months later, and we had what are called video interviews, where you get 10 questions and they're pre-recorded, and you have about 4 minutes to answer that question. So that was really weird. You have to practice, because, I mean, I was like on my desk just answering this interview. You don't really know how you're going to do, and then you ended up hearing back a month later, that I had an interview with HR and then also on the unit. And then they got back pretty quick. But definitely if you have any sort of like phone call, interview, and like online Skype, you should like work with David and practice, because I remember going and meeting with him and asking how that'd go, because it's different.
Before we move on to the next person, how many of you guys visited the Career Center, the practice interview? So, very helpful, highly recommend it. Bree, did you want to talk about
Oh yeah,
the application process?
Thanks. Yeah, I kind of contacted a lot of the seniors last year and asked them like who they knew at the hospital, and then reached out to those nurse recruiters. Even if I wasn't really like that interested, I just wanted to like have a ton of options. And the nurse recruiters were really helpful and like really gave me like the dates of things, like the deadlines. And I was able to just like kind of keep in contact with them. And then I kind of like stalked the websites too, and that really helped. Definitely talking to the past. Kelly, did you want to?
Oh, yeah. Actually, for mine, I didn't interview at all. So for the Mayo Clinic, they just had you write 2 essays because they wanted to hear more about you. It was kind of like when you're applying to college, where they don't just look at your resume and look at your GPA. They want to hear like why. I think the questions were, why did you want to be a nurse, and what's your life motto? So they do a lot of it based on your essays. So I just did that, my resume, those essays, and then I got an interest form probably about 2 months later about what unit I would want to work on, and then I ranked them, and then I heard back after that.
Yeah, and I just want to say that it totally doesn't hurt to apply to a ton of hospitals, which is what I did, because you hear back at different times from all of them, and some of them you don't even hear back. So that would be my advice. I kind of did it the same way Catherine did it, where I made a big Excel spreadsheet, and you apply online, and then you hear at different times. But that's just one piece of advice I give, because you never really know where you end up. I didn't think I would end up in New York, but I did, and it was great.
So we kind of started talking about the interview process. I think it would be helpful if you like went down the line and everyone just said an interview question that kind of caught them off guard, or you think would be very beneficial for them to know, like a common question.
I think in all the interviews I did, they ask why nursing, and that's something that maybe like hasn't been totally formed yet for you guys. Like mentally, you're still trying to figure it out, especially with really only now getting like very hands-on one-on-one nursing skills in med surg for most of you guys. But definitely that's a question that can tell the recruiter or the interviewer a lot about who you are, and depending on what you say, your personality really shines through that, and that ultimately will end up taking you into like the next question. Usually they'll follow up with something that you said in regards to it. So definitely, I know it sounds simple and you're like, of course I want to be a nurse, like I love helping people or something. You have to think of something a little bit more unique than that, because everyone who's a nurse loves helping people, right? Like that's why you guys are all here. So try to think of something to put a little spin on it. If you can bring it personal, great, like more power to you that way. If you don't, that's fine. Just think of something that's like unique about it.
Unique. Going off of that, a big question that I got with a lot of my interviews was something unique about me that wasn't nursing related. So I would say to think of things about you, which is really hard to think of like on the spot. So definitely have a list of things about you that will set you apart from other people. May that be other academic interests, sports, whatever. Just find something that'll make you stand out.
Just kind of like a side note, I Googled nursing interviews, and there's a ton of like nursing forums and like little websites that will just give you a bunch of lists of questions, and those are the questions that you'll get asked. And prepare and like just make a couple bullet points on like each little question and refer back to that as much as possible.
A lot of the hospitals now are doing behavioral interviewing, and that was one of the things that CHOP definitely incorporated into their interview with me. One of the questions that kind of threw me off guard was how I would raise a concern to somebody who may be like higher ranked than me, so like a nursing supervisor or somebody like that. And
the best advice I can give is to have a little list of vignettes or stories from your clinical experience in the hospital, or even if it's not in clinical, just from your life. You're all involved in clubs or sports or whatever it is, that you can apply to difficult questions like that, because they want to ask you the hard questions that are, how did you act in this situation? It's not, tell me your strengths or tell me your weaknesses. Now they're moving towards, this is a situation you're given, how would you act here? So having a story to back that up, definitely, I think, is what sets you apart from other people.
This wasn't a question I got, but I would say something that's really important for interviewing is coming prepared with questions to ask the person who's interviewing you. Because if at the end everyone is going to ask, oh, do you have any questions? And it may seem like a great idea to say, oh no, I don't have any questions, I understand everything, thank you so much. But they really want you to ask questions. They really want to see that you're interested in their unit. You can ask them anything really, like, I don't know, nurse to patient ratio, whatever you want to ask, but just come prepared with some type of questions to ask your interviewer.
Going off of what Mary was talking about with the behavioral questions, I think those were definitely by far the most common type I experienced. And like she said, have a bunch of different kind of stories you can go off of. But something I practiced a lot before, when doing practice interviews, was how to organize those stories. I know at the Career Center I practiced the STAR response all the time, and it helped me from just droning on about the not relevant parts of the story and focus on what the question was asking and what they're looking for in a nurse extern. So that was really helpful, and a lot of the questions were tell me about a time that you had to work with someone that you didn't really think you could work with, but you had to figure out a way to do it, or talk about a time that you failed but something good came of it. Things that you really kind of had to think of. You had to at least have something in your head before going in, rather than thinking on the spot. And a lot of them were related to traits or situations you might face in nursing. So kind of think along those lines, how do you function under pressure, or tell me about a time that you were something under pressure, or different skills related to nursing. And there's one other thing I want to say. We can come back to it.
Mine was very similar. That's okay.
Okay. And then I know Taylor and Emily mentioned phone and video interviews. Did anyone have a panel or multiple people interview them? And did you think it was harder to do a phone interview or harder to do a video interview?
When I went in for my actual interview, it was me and 5 other hospital staff members, and it was kind of a typical board meeting kind of thing where they all sat at one end of the table and me on the other end, and I thought that was kind of intimidating. I thought it was very intimidating actually, but they each went down and asked me a separate question, and they were all taking notes the entire time. So remember to make eye contact when you're talking to them, because it's easy to worry about what they're writing down. So, and like everyone said, using personal stories helps in your interviews. But the phone interview I didn't think it was that bad. One recommendation I would have is make your notes like everyone said, but don't be filing through papers while you're on the phone with them looking for your answer. Just be yourself, practice, and know the stories and points you want to make before you answer the phone, because otherwise it's not going to go well.
Jasmine and then
So my application and interviewing process was very different than everyone else's. I kind of got my position through Mrs. Abdallah because Cooper had emailed very last minute. So my interview was on campus during the week of finals with a board of 5 or 6 people there. So my biggest advice to anyone in that situation is just they know that you're in the middle of testing, but they still expect you to be professional and just take a deep breath. Everything's going to be okay. I also interviewed at Lankenau, and that was different as well in that I interviewed with one person, and then we went on a unit tour. And I didn't think of the unit tour as an interview, but that's still very much part of your interview. So make sure that you're speaking to everyone you meet on the unit. Make sure you show your interest. right away. Yeah.
So I kind of had the opposite experience. I was actually part of a group interview, so there were 5 people who wanted the job and 1 interviewer, and I had no idea that that's what I was walking into, so that was a little surprising. But it ended up being totally fine. So you kind of have to go in with an open mind. You're not really sure what you're going to walk into on an interview always, but just an important thing to keep in mind with that is you want to make sure that you're not kind of like controlling the interview, because there's 4 other people that you need to be respectful of. So you don't want your answers to drone on and on. You don't want to try and like show them up or anything, because that's not the type of person they're looking for to work on their unit. And yeah, it ended up being fine.
So the next question is, why did you choose a specific hospital? And were there any things that stood out, whether good or bad, about the hospital that you worked at?
Is anyone else?
I know I chose mine because it was like far away from my house and I kind of wanted to try living in that area. I also looked them up earlier and like saw their like mission statement, and I know a lot of them are similar, but I really like agreed with a lot that they said. So I was able to kind of like implement that also into the interview. But I really liked like what they stood for, and I was liking it.
Sure. So I chose the Mayo Clinic because I'm actually from New Jersey, so I went like halfway across the country to go. And again, like what Brianna said, their mission statement about like patient first, like that really stuck with me. And then also they provided subsidized housing, so all the externs lived together at a college campus. So there was 53 of us, so there was a bunch of people from all over the country that we were all there. And it was also only like $1,000 for the whole summer. It was 10 weeks. So that was a big driving factor. And then also my floor had gotten #1 by U.S. News and World Report for the past 5 years. So I thought that would have been a good experience to have as well.
Sorry. So I was at CHOP, and the thing that attracted me to CHOP was that I always kind of knew I wanted to work with kids. Pediatrics is what I want to go into still. So my sophomore year and junior year, I started volunteering there, and I just noticed that the culture there was so different than any of the hospitals we would go to during clinical. It was very family-centered, you see a different side of nursing when you see pediatric nursing, but also when you see CHOP nursing. So during my sophomore and junior year, I really got a feel for it just by volunteering and just observing the people who worked there. And then the other reason I chose the CHOP externship was because they were starting a new program this past summer. They started rotating units. So what it used to be was just 10 weeks on a unit that you ranked your preferences based on like a general idea. So like med surg or surgical or intensive care. But this past summer, they let you put your preferences in those 3 areas ranked, but then they let you rotate through 3 different units. So I was on a NICU step-down unit, so I worked with anybody from a couple days old to, I guess, a couple months old. And then my second unit was a hematology unit, so I was working with anybody from a couple days old to a 21-year-old. And then my third unit was oncology, so it was something that I'd never been exposed to. So CHOP does a really good job of giving you a variety of experiences for things that you might not normally see. So that was one of the things that really attracted me to CHOP.
Sorry, hi again. I just want to talk about, like I mentioned before, I actually worked at a summer camp between my sophomore and junior year, and so I kind of want to put a little spin on the question for why you might not want to work in a hospital and might want to work somewhere else. Obviously, I had a great experience at the hospital that I worked in between my junior and senior year, but there's all this pressure that I'm sure you guys are feeling now about, like, you have to be in this hospital, like, it has to have this ranking, and everyone's talking about it. But honestly, the experience that I had at this summer camp, and it's called a medical assistant, and I know that a lot of summer camps will have this, and so it was a 24-hour summer camp. Kids were there, their ages 7 to 16. So if you're interested in pediatrics, it's a really cool thing to do because you're so involved in day-to-day care. Kids will come in and you triage them, and you just kind of like check with the nurses, and you take a little course, and you're able to administer medications. And you actually give daily medications to kids throughout the camp. And a lot of them take like a ton of medications, and it's great practice, and you get really used to like medication names and how to give them, and like so many kids have asthma and diabetes, and it was really great hands-on experience. And I also was in contact with a lot of parents. I had to talk on the phone with a lot of parents who were super concerned about whether their kid was okay and eating right and taking this medication at this certain time. And so that was a really great skill I learned, just talking to parents and patient advocacy. So on the other end of working in the hospital, you can always explore other avenues, and sometimes they can be even more fruitful in ways that you wouldn't even anticipate.
That's a very good point for parents, freshmen, or sophomores nowadays, because I know it is harder to get a paid job. So doing something like a summer camp is a great experience.
And fun. Lots of fun.
Okay. The next question is relating to the job. So what were your job responsibilities? Were you a tech? Were you with a nurse? Did you have any mentors or anything like that?
So I worked as a tech over the summer. MGH calls them patient care associates. So if I say PCA, it's the same thing as a tech. So I was oriented for 2 weeks on the unit by nurses and PCAs alike, just to get a feel of like, you know, the day-to-day routine, what the nurse did, what the PCA did, you know, how the patients were, stuff like that. And after those 2 weeks, I was on my own, which was super stressful at first because I was like used to being in clinical where you have an instructor, you know, telling you to do this, or you're shadowing someone, and like I was like, oh God, this is so stressful. But sorry, what was the question? Oh, duties.
What did you do?
Okay, so my main job was like taking a lot of vital signs, helping with like ADLs, so like bathing, showering, changing beds, cleaning rooms, because the unit I worked on, it was a hematology oncology unit with a lot of bone marrow transplant patients, so they were super, super, super prone to infection. So you had to be extremely careful about, you know, spreading anything, because like you could, if you drop something on the floor, if it was like a pillowcase, like it had to be in the wash, like no matter what, like seconds, like nothing. So it sounds like it wasn't a lot, but I felt like I was busy all day. It was mainly just like doing like little things for patients that they needed, like helping them up because they were like really weak, or, you know, just like putting cream on their feet. But it's always like the little things that people are really appreciative for, and I think that was what I enjoyed the most about my job, was that I felt like I was helping even if I wasn't doing what I thought was like super intense.
So I was paired up with a nurse. My role was kind of like a patient care tech as well, but I worked alongside the nurse. We had the same 5 to 6 patients. My role was to plan out how we were going to plan our day. So since I was in rehab, my patients had 7 to 8 hours a day of therapy, so I had to plan when we were going to cath them, when we were going to do bowel programs, when we would get their time-sensitive meds in relation to their therapy schedule. So the nurse would say, this is what we have to do today, plan it out, and then let me know what time we're going to do each of these tasks. So it was like a mentor role, but then I also, like I said, did the cathing and bowel programs. I bathed the patients, got them in and out of bed. Most of my patients were spinal cord injury, stroke, and traumatic brain injury, so they require a lot of help. A lot of them can't do stuff by themselves. So one of the biggest things I learned in my role was time management. That was a big, big key this summer.
My program was a little bit different. I was in a fellowship program, so it was a much more educational experience than being a tech. And I think this is something that's important for you guys to kind of distinguish between when you guys are looking into jobs. I think, people can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they're basically like, you can be a tech where you're doing like vitals, helping out the nurse. You could have like a shadow experience, or you could be in like a type of fellowship that I was involved in. And each of those 3 things has very different responsibilities. So it's kind of a matter of, what are you seeking for in a summer? Are you looking to master your med-surg skills and like really get down the activities of daily living and you know, take thousands of blood pressures, but like feel so confident about that? Then like the tech is the perfect job for you. I was more interested in like the educational aspect of it. I really wanted to do pediatric oncology, so my role as a Flynn Fellow, they called it, I was paired up with a nurse and was with her for 5 weeks inpatient, and then I went to an outpatient oncology unit. And I basically shadowed her and got to see like a day in the life of a nurse consistently. So she had 3 12s back to back. I would do 3 12s back to back, and I would be just working with her alongside. And of course, through that, I was, doing things that a tech would do as well. I was taking vital signs. I was like helping, change the beds and things like that. But mine was a much more like educational experience. So I got to see learn about all the medications that were being delivered, all the different chemos. And by the end, it was nice because you formed such a relationship with the nurse that you were paired up with that she gave me a lot more responsibility and freedom to help patients out in ways that maybe protocol-wise they're a little bit more strict on, but they gave me that freedom. So it was definitely a fun program though. Educational-wise, I just learned a lot.
Can I just make So while mine was more strictly performing duties, all the nurses on the unit knew I was a nursing student as well. So if I was in the room with them, they would explain things to me and, teach me what they were doing or let me watch if I wasn't super busy. And once you're on a unit for, even a week, I felt like I was I knew what was happening. When someone would throw out these abbreviations GVH, TPN, I knew what they meant after a week, and at first I was oh my god, I have no idea what's happening. So just being thrown into something, you really learn a lot and you become very knowledgeable about the unit you're working on, even if it's not a strictly educational type job experience.
I think Jasmine and Kelly.
So the hospital that I was at, it was kind of split. So we had juniors there who, now current juniors, they were sophomores, who followed techs, and that was pretty much their position. And then the now seniors were following nurses. I was on a NICU, and I don't know if this is universal to all NICUs, but the techs on our unit were more unit secretaries. So they split I was there for 8 weeks, so they did 7 weeks with me under a nurse, and I did almost everything other than invasive things, so giving meds, anything that could be dangerous. And then I switched to the unit secretary position because at Cooper, and I know this is true for a couple of hospitals, they can transfer you to a tech position at the end of your actual externship experience. So that's something to definitely ask about in your interview if continued employment is a possibility.
So my role this summer was kind of different in that I followed the nurse. So I had 4 nurse preceptors because I worked, all the summer 3s work 7 to 3, Monday through Friday. So it'd be whatever nurse was on the day shift that day, but I mainly stayed with 4 nurses. And what I really liked about this was they almost kind of yelled at me when I was doing the tech stuff because the purpose of it was to know how a nurse would go about her daily and doing all of her routines and this med's due, so let's cluster this care, and I would have to choose what you were saying, what patient to go to first and how to organize their day. And I was on a surgical floor, a GI and colorectal floor, so there was a lot of wounds, so I always did the wound changes, but obviously the nurse was there, and wound vacs, drains, all these things I've never worked with because the med surg floor I was on didn't have these things. So I took out catheters, I would get thrown into the rapid response all the time, so I basically did everything but meds. And it was really nice to be able to see that, and also the way the nurses worked at the Mayo Clinic was when I went in there, they wouldn't introduce me oh, this is Kelly, the summer 3, they would introduce me as if kind of I was a nurse, on the same kind of level as them. So the patient didn't think of me any differently than the nurse. So that was really nice.
There's definitely a variety of things that you can do depending on where you work. So the next question, was it paid or unpaid? And did this influence you getting a job there?
I guess I can go. For me, it was paid. I mean, it's not a ton of money. And since I was in New York, I actually lived with my uncle who lived outside the city because otherwise I think I probably would have broken even. So that is like an important thing to consider. And also for my summer camp job, that was paid. And you don't have to pay for food or housing or anything because it's summer camp and you live in a cute little cabin.
Oh yeah. Mine was paid as well, but similarly, I lived in Georgetown and it kind of like broke even on that as well.
Mine was paid as well, and I don't live close enough to New York City to like still live at home. So I lived in the Marymount Manhattan College dorms, which was more of a break-even situation. So I think that's definitely something to consider, and reach out to anybody you know who might live near somewhere you want to work. But I think the experience also was it was paid, but also the experience was very valuable.
My externship was also paid, and I actually lived in Bryn Mawr this summer and took the train into CHOP every day, because except when SEPTA was shut down. But they do offer University of Penn housing for the summer, but kind of similar to the other externships, you're going to kind of get to that break-even point. So if there's somebody you know, I would advise living with them, or if you can find a cheaper place to live and commute, that's always an option too.
Mine was paid as well, but unlike anyone here, I lived at home, so I just got to keep all the money I made, which was great, because I didn't have to pay rent at home. So that was really nice. So if you're looking for that and you want to like be towards home, I would recommend it. I took the train in whenever I had work because it was pretty close. I would walk, to and from the train, which is an exhausting day, but it was worth it. I loved it. So.
I'm similar to Devin. I lived at home. I commuted on the train. My train ride was like half an hour, and then I had a 2-mile walk from the train to the hospital. So I enjoyed it. I would definitely do it again.
Mine was paid as well, but it was kind of nice, and I lived in my senior year housing because most of them will start June 1st for you guys. So if you choose to stay in the area, you can either sublet from someone. There's always people, seniors looking to sublet. So if you get a job around here, and whether you're on campus housing for a senior or your rent, for example, doesn't start till August 1st, there are always people looking to sublet. So definitely don't let that be a factor that would make you not choose a position. But it's also my position. It was usually 3 12s a week. So usually 1 or 2 days, the other 2 days I would babysit. So that was really nice to be able to get additional money because I wasn't making a ton.
Yeah, I lived at home. I saved a lot of money. It was nice.
I also lived at home, but no one else mentioned this. Cooper had free parking. Parking can be very expensive at hospitals, and also they had free uniforms, which I was worried about as well. So, because I don't think Mainline had free uniforms. I don't know.
Did a lot of you guys have to buy scrubs or wear the Villanova?
I love Villanova. Not the jacket though.
Okay, so to kind of wrap things up, the last question, do you have any tips, recommendations for the students in the audience? Just maybe go down the line, one tip.
Someone already said it, but don't be discouraged if you don't hear back from hospitals. There are still hospitals that I've been applying to this day that I haven't heard back from. It'll be okay.
My tip is to stay open with your decision. I thought I wanted to be a labor and delivery nurse. They put me on a neuro ICU. I walked in not really knowing, even being on a ICU prior, and I fell in love. And that's what I want to do with my career. So yeah, just be open.
I just have 2 quick things. One is, as horrible and painful as the CEIs can be, they can actually be very useful before an interview. If you just read through the your comment section and things that you did, those are the stories. If you're telling your professor about those for a grade, you want to tell the interviewers about those. And that was one of the best things about the CEI was that it enabled me to before my interview, when I was trying to figure out behavioral answers and things like that, I was able to look and say when did I provide the best patient care? Because that was a question for me, was when did you exemplify extraordinary patient care? So for those questions, it was nice to have the answers kind of already there, because of course in a long med surg rotation you do so much and it's hard to keep track. So that definitely like use your CEI to your advantage. And then my second thing is just like the simple things that you're told from like day one, like shake people's hands firmly, like smile, look at people in the eye. The handshaking like can really go a long way, and the just similar to thank you notes, like definitely handwrite a thank you note. The seniors had someone last week come talk to us, and the question was like, do you handwrite a thank you note or do you email them? And I think I was always kind of like on edge about that last year, not sure what to do. And the bottom line is that, you know, if you think about it, if you got a hand thank you note, it just means more. Of course, if you got someone emailed you a thank you note, you'd be just as appreciative, but it's just like an extra something that kind of can put you one step above someone else. So definitely get their contact information at the end of an interview and follow up with them, whether you choose to do it over email or a thank you note.
I have two things as well. My first one is to use LinkedIn. Going into my junior year, I didn't understand like how or why a nurse would really use LinkedIn. I met with Patty and we talked about how to connect with people. I sent a message to, I think, like 20 Villanova alumni members in Chicago, just asking them if I could ask them questions about their career. I wasn't like looking for a job, but it was just understanding how they got to whatever point they were in their career. 15 of the 20 responded, and I met with 5 of them. So that was like a much better turnout than I expected, because I was like, oh, no one checks their message on LinkedIn. But it turns out a lot of people did, and I got a lot of information about like how people got into their like nurse practitioner programs or how they got into the field that they're in. My other tip of advice is I think your internship experience could be a good way to figure out if like a certain area that's maybe a fear of yours is really a fear, or if it's something you like. So I chose rehabilitation because it was something I have not been exposed to at Villanova. And I haven't really yet been. So my first experience was through my internship, and it's probably what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. So I think it's a good way to figure out other areas you might have interest in.
I guess my advice would be to not really stress. All of us know that nursing school is very stressful, and there are many, many days when you're like, why am I a nurse? Why do I want to do this? Like, why am I putting myself through this? But when I worked this summer and I just like, you know, interacted with patients, and they just told me like, oh my gosh, like you made my day. You make me so happy. Like one time some woman gave me her birthday cake because she told me I was so good to her, and like she was so appreciative of it, and like that's why we do what we do, and like that's why we're all putting ourselves through this. And so just know that it's all worth it, and like you'll realize it soon enough if you haven't realized it yet. So just don't worry, you'll make it through and you'll be fine.
I'm kind of going to echo what Emily said. Use your connections. I feel like every other day I hear about people in the business school have a networking event or something else to go to, but nurses don't really have that many. So when somebody comes, I know Kim Delaney was here the other day, she's the nurse recruiter for CHOP. Go to those things, meet those people, shake their hands, write down their names, remember their names, and when you're applying for jobs, mention their names. It's okay to name drop, because CHOP at least wants to know that you have a connection to CHOP, and that will definitely help you out. And even when I was volunteering, my boss who was my volunteer boss, I put her name down on my application. Nothing can really go against you if you can use somebody's name who has a connection to somebody else. So definitely start those connections early.
I think similar to what Mary said, I was going to say something really similar. Don't be afraid, like if you know family or friends or someone who is involved in the area you want to be in or a hospital that you are interested in, don't be afraid to ask them about it or to try to use them as like a reference or some kind of connection. Almost everyone I think would want to help you out, and I think it can be more helpful than you think. I found out about the program I did from my cousin who works at the same hospital, but he works in like accounting, so totally separate, but I think it can only help you. And not only myself, but so many people that I met in the program had some kind of person that they knew who knew someone or anyone. So it's a great way to try to get involved in a hospital or program.
I would say also definitely like prepare your answers and kind of know what you're going to say, not like down to the word, but sort of have like the gist of what you're going to say. I know I went to the Career Center with David Liebig so many times, and it really helped me. It definitely helped like with the interview and like take away some of the nerves that are associated with it.
My answer is not that different. But like I kind of said before, just be totally open-minded. It'll all kind of work out how it's supposed to. Just like with the whole summer camp thing, like how cool is it that you can walk into an interview and like have something different to say, like as opposed to all of these people who had nurse externships, which is great. You can say that you were like a camp medical assistant for 24 hours, and it's just like a little something different. And also, I would recommend after your summer is over, asking your nurse manager or assistant nurse manager for a recommendation. I asked some of the nurses who I got really close with recommendations too. And actually one patient overheard me asking a nurse for a recommendation and was like, I'll write you a recommendation. So now I have a recommendation from a patient too. So that way you're just like fresh in their brain, they know exactly what you did, and they're more like willing and able to write you a better recommendation that speaks to what you did.
And I guess my advice would be don't limit yourself. Like, don't apply to hospitals just because you don't think you have the GPA for it, or you don't want to go to that side of the country, or I would just apply everywhere and see what happens, and then you have all those options to choose from. Worst case scenario, you don't hear back, you don't get it. But then also, like, I went to Minnesota, I have no family over there, no connection to Mayo Clinic. I didn't know a single person doing the program. Like, worst case, it's 10 weeks, but it was an awesome experience, and I wouldn't have changed it for anything.
So that's all the questions that I have. So do you guys have any specific questions for the panel?
I don't have a question, but I want to say that I am very impressed with what I'm hearing. And I also want to kind of stoke the fire and say that we have found that our students who do choose to do this kind of thing in the summer, it builds confidence, it is good for your networking, it's a good thing to do. It has payoffs that are probably maybe not as lucrative as a tip if you were serving hamburgers somewhere, but it certainly will help build your career. But I came tonight not just to hear what you had to say, but also to make public an announcement that I will ask Mrs. Abdella to put on the email very soon. This is a volunteer opportunity, which is new for us, and I'll try to be very brief in explaining it. You know, and Patty, you know that for the last couple of years there have been opportunities for a couple of students to have an oncology experience. There's a gentleman in Connecticut by the name of Fred Flynn, his wife died of cancer, and he supports nursing students to have summer experiences at Sloan Kettering, at Huff, at CHOP, and other places. There is also a program that he's involved in, as are the parents of one of our freshmen. And it has been extended to Boston College nursing students and Fairfield, and now this year to us as well. Nurses and physicians, as well as a few selected students, go to Lourdes for a week or two, and I can't tell you exactly the time frame. We'll put that in an email. And as you know, if you know anything about Lourdes, it's where people go because they believe that the spiritual experience is very helpful in their healing. And so people go as pilgrims, but some of them are quite ill, and so they need nurses and physicians to be with them and to help them. And so people volunteer. Lay people volunteer for what they can do, and then nurses and physicians and these nursing students also go with them. And so this couple, the parents of freshmen, have been doing this every year, and they are going to sponsor and pay the airfare and the hotels for two of our students this year, and they have to be rising seniors, which means you need to be a junior now. And it will be selective. If anybody is interested after you see the information out on the web, you can come and see me, and I have the application slips. And I think it's a wonderful experience. For those of you that are involved with campus ministry and things like that, it would be a natural fit because it's nursing and it's also the spirituality piece. I have never been to Lourdes. but it is something that I think is probably something wonderful to see and to be part of. So expect to hear more about that, and we're delighted that now this is being extended to Villanova students. I've talked to the dean and at BC, and their students have been doing it for a couple of years, and of course, Mr. Flynn has been up in New England, but he's particularly interested in students from Catholic schools of nursing. You don't have to be Catholic, but what I'm saying is it is an opportunity for us to take advantage of, so you'll hear more about it. So thank you for time. I didn't know if I was going to make it tonight. I wandered all through Driscoll Hall, down an elevator, looking for you, because I hadn't read carefully. But anyway, thank you, and thank you, Patty, for getting this together.
I just wanted to quickly echo what Dean Patrick just said. I actually went to Horace in high school on this service type of trip that she was just talking about. So if anybody wants like additional information about the whole experience there, I went for like 10 days with a group of like high school students from my area. So if it's something that interests you, it was one of the best things I've done in my life. So if it's something that you're interested in, I'm Catherine. The information is everywhere, I think, in emails that Patty will send out, but I'm more than happy to talk to any of you guys about that program if it interests you.
So no questions?
Which one of you worked in the NICU? You? Alright, I volunteered in NICU in high school. Like, where'd you say you worked?
I was at Cooper in Camden.
Oh, okay.
And I worked at Georgetown.
Oh, okay. So you did that after your junior year?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So like, I might be trying to do that this summer. Is there any like hospitals around the Philadelphia area that you would recommend especially?
I would recommend Cooper. It's in Camden. I love it. I had a wonderful time there. What I really liked about Cooper is the location. It's a very different population than what you see out here. So you saw more than just a preterm infant. There was a lot of neonatal abstinence syndrome, which is one of them. But I would say to put yourself in a location that is different from what you're used to.
I know some good NICUs in the Philadelphia area include CHOP, DuPont. I know Jefferson has a good NICU. I'm not sure about their summer programs since I did work in DC, but those are a couple of hospitals.
Pennsylvania also has a level 3 or 4. But all the ones she mentioned earlier, I think CHOP's level 4 and all the ones are level 3. So there is great places to be.
Alright, so like what were you guys doing? Just like feeding the babies, doing like meds or?
Everything but getting
Oh, okay.
for me.
For me, I was a tech, 2 out of 3 days of the week, and then I was with a nurse, and when I was with a nurse, I was basically able to do all patient care with her supervision. So, yeah.
Do you work with the parents as well? Like,
Yes,
definitely.
yeah.
Which I wasn't. I mean, you know you're going to see the parents. I think this goes for anyone in peds or anyone in general. You always have a family. But it's very different when you're dealing with someone's child.
Yeah.
Especially when the child cannot speak.
Thanks.
I have a question just kind of in general. So for when you were looking on the websites and like looking for different ones that you liked and what interests you, besides talking to seniors who previously did it, did you think that it was easy to find like on the website some of the contacts to email them and like find out more about the program and talk about? Because I know right now like looking like not a lot of the applications like they're not even really out right now or like the deadlines, so like to email them to like not really miss it or whatnot, like is that easy to find?
Something I did was hospitals that I was definitely interested in. I actually called HR and they just connect you to someone who knows the deadline and when it's going to come out. And a lot of the time, because I called, the woman who I spoke to on the phone ultimately actually sent me an email to be like, hey, it's out. So that was helpful for me. But otherwise, just kind of like periodically checking. Also like being a good friend and telling your other nursing friends who are like interested that it's out. That's good too.
I would say the best resource you have is Ms. Vidala, because she has this wonderful list. I didn't know
update the list.
No, but like, it's, I think the last year version is still very valid, just because it gives you an idea and sort of starting point. Also, if you just Google nursing externships, with like the city that you're looking for, Penn, University, has a list of externships in numerous cities for their students, and it's all
The other thing I would say is if you're going to if you're going to like a career fair or something, grab the business cards. They're a super easy way to just get the information.
There are two, just FYI for you guys, there are two really good free websites for externships. One, Penn does. Did you guys look at the Penn website? So Penn actually has a whole website that lists externships by state, is it?
Yeah.
And then it lists, it's not everything that's available out there, but it gives you a good, variety of opportunities. And then UNC, you guys see the University of North Carolina one as well, and that's by region. So what I'll do is I'll send that out to you guys so that you have those links that you can start your search if you'd like. Okay?
How many did you guys apply to? Like, what's a good number to, get your name out there?
I applied to a ton. I know I applied to like upwards of 10, I think, and like half them I don't even know. Like, yeah, definitely over 10.
Yeah, that's probably.
I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, probably 10 too. You don't hear back from some, and that's just kind of the nature of applying online. There's a lot of people applying, and they just don't get back to everyone, unfortunately. So, honestly, probably better more than less, because if you have your heart on something, you might not even hear back from them. And so it's really important to be open-minded to experiences that maybe you wouldn't have thought of first.
I think it's also like, even if you apply to a ton and you're still not sure like which one you're most interested in, it's a really good experience, even if you're going to do like a bunch of different interviews or like the process itself. By the end, you'll be so much better at, and could definitely help you in the long run in job searches, or say by the end you're applying to one that you realize you're really interested in. You've like maybe done an interview or two or something. So I don't think it can hurt to kind of broaden your horizons.
I would definitely say check out that UPenn website. I remember, now that you reminded me of that, I remember going through and there's like hundreds of them. I think I applied to 3 different ones, but there's so many options for anything you're looking for. So definitely check out the UPenn website.
I would just be sure to keep an eye out early. I know the fellowship that I applied to, I think the application was due early December. And I found out very quickly afterwards that I got an interview. And actually, when I had an interview for that fellowship, I also had an interview on the unit I worked on, because someone I knew on the unit had passed my resume on to the nurse manager. So I kind of knew where I was going to end up working in like December, which is different, than a lot of people, because like it's kind of early to hear back. So I would just be sure to like stay on top of things, just so you don't miss anything that could be an opportunity that you weren't expecting.
In regards to your question, I don't think there's a perfect number. Like, if you have applied to the ones you really want and you think that's all you want to do, then that's fine. I mean, you don't have to apply to 10 or 15. There's no specific number. Whatever you're comfortable with, it'll work out the way it should. So don't get too nervous about it.
Yeah, I think I only applied to 2, so it really just depends on what you're looking for.
Also, remember that you can apply to tech positions. A lot of hospitals will take students as techs, and I know Jefferson specifically has rolling applications, and you can apply to specific units. So even if you don't hear back about one, you can always apply again. So just don't limit yourself, but also, like they said, don't go crazy and apply to like 600. That's not safe. If you can find one, do it. There are some out there. My hospital hired sophomores.
I think it's definitely a lot harder to find like an externship position after sophomore year. There are like very, very few of them. A lot of times they want to see that you've been in a hospital setting in clinical for longer. So with that said, I babysat my whole summer after sophomore year, and I volunteered once a week in the hospital. And I think that if there are sophomores here, that's really all. I personally think that's all you really need to be doing, showing that like you're still interested in learning and invested in like a hospital setting, but they of course understand that you have 6 clinical rotations under your belt at that point. So like do what you want to be doing this summer. Don't feel any pressure to be doing something like very nursing 101.
And then Kelly.
Yeah, I went to the conference said too as a sophomore, and also I worked for the Red Cross the summer after my sophomore year, and I was more in a business role, but it was targeted towards nurses. So I did like the basic life support advertisement towards nurses. So I was calling all the major nursing organizations like the ANA, trying to get in touch with them, and also that was good to learn from that side, like stuff that we're gonna have to put into practice anyways. So there's opportunities like that too that are a little bit out of the box, but still nursing related, and the same with the summer camp. So really any experience, but also do what you want to as a sophomore, because you'll have time.
Also, I know there's like clinics too that you could always volunteer at. I know Independence Blue Cross does a lot, so you could try Googling that. I don't really know what the cutoff is in terms of like how many clinical hours you need to have to apply, but that's something you could look into too.